Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram live. I'm going to be talking a little bit, took a pause there, I was trying to think exactly how I'm going to phrase what I'm talking about without it being reassurance in any way. I often say, as people who follow me and know on here, about thoughts are thoughts. Thought and why that doesn't often cut it. But it's also important to acknowledge why we have that phrase and how that plays an important part in the recovery journey. All humans have thoughts. They have any thought. They stand at a crossroads, there's a pram, someone's standing there with a pram, they have a thought, what if I push that pram in front of a truck? Humans have that thought in a second. Why? Because the brain is checking for a danger signal. It sees something vulnerable, it wants to protect it, and then it creates that sensation. So the thought comes in as a protective, life-saving sort of mechanism. Not just that, the human brain can have any thought. The human can think anything, okay? If you see someone walking down the street at night and you're all alone, you may have the thought, I could kill them, yeah? Now, that thought is a thought that all humans have. They think these things because the brain is thinking, God, it's very lonely and quiet. Someone could get attacked. What if I could attack them? That thought may come in. That is not rare. With OCD, there is all these terms are a load of nonsense and confusing, but we have to use them to describe a lot of the time, but they get completely taken out of context and we get completely lost. You've got OCD. That's anxiety. It's an anxiety disorder, okay? So, and it operates in the form of obsessions and compulsions. Now, all these terms, HOCD, ROCD, POCD, makes people think they've got a separate diagnosis. You haven't. You've had a thought, like all humans. Chronic guilt, chronic anxiety, latches, creates a sensation. So if someone says they have POCD, they have ROCD, they don't. They've got OCD, they're having a thought of, I'm scared to lose my boyfriend, I'm scared to lose my house, I'm scared to get cancer. This doesn't make them the thing. Because often then the diagnosis, people think, oh God, it's so terrible that I have POCD. Oh, how unlucky I am to have ROCD. No, you have OCD. And this is a thought that you're scared of. You haven't got POCD, ROCD. We use these terms as descriptions. Otherwise, it's very difficult to explain them. Otherwise, it will just be, if we did away with all the terms, then people get kind of lost. So it's a tricky one. It's not as simple as it sounds. So first of all, do I like the term pure OCD? No. I've done videos on that talking about that. It makes it sound like a term where it's a more pure, concentrated, treatment-resistant form of OCD, a really hard to escape form of OCD. That's pure OCD. That's what I thought anyway when I initially thought it. And then over the years of speaking to lots of people with OCD, I saw that was very common. So OCD, the term, yes. Do we need pure OCD? No. We could just say OCD that occurs without mental compulsions and educate more doctors and therapists on what it actually is in terms of OCD is not just cleaning. If it was explained properly, we wouldn't need a term pure OCD. Now, what about all the other terms? The other terms in the community, there's nothing wrong with using them in the descriptive context. It's fine. And who am I to judge? Who am I to say what we can use and what we can't? It's not me choosing it. This is just my perception of what I think is advisable. So the term POCD, ROCD, HOCD is good in the community to be used. They're good points. They're helpful. They help people see what it is a lot of the time. Would I prefer it that they change to I'm having relationship thoughts, fears, and so on? Yeah, I think it probably would be better, but I'd have to have a real think about how that would work, and it's obviously set up now, and it's obviously runs in a way it's not really causing too much of a problem unless people don't know about what I'm talking about here. So without having this awareness, this understanding, then it is a problem because people then start to think, oh, I'm in such a terrible way, I'm stuck with this forever. Look, I've got a bit of hay fever at the moment. Say I had OCD and I had a fear of hay fever getting worse. I haven't got hay fever OCD, but it's so easy to start thinking that. And then people feel completely hopeless. They think, fucking hell, I've got OCD, I've been diagnosed this year with POCD, ROCD, and I've got pure OCD. This is the worst luck. No, you have OCD. These are just parts of it. And you don't feel so alone and isolated and like everything's going wrong. And the problem with all these terms, it's like a lot of things. We put too many terms for things and we get completely complicated because we can't even make sense of what's going on. And I think it's important to take a step back with this and to look at things and think, okay, I'm having a scary thought. Okay, I'm having a scary thought about the past. Okay, I'm having that insight to some degree. I know OCD is going to make it feel as real as possible, hence why we go towards unconditional self and life acceptance. But it's good to have some context to it too, that it is a human brain that's just doing that. You haven't got a broken brain. You're no different to other humans. That's the thing. People feel so isolated. They think, God, I've got the worst thoughts. Nobody else has that. They do, but they don't have the chronic anxiety, chronic guilt sensation that latches in the brain in that mechanism, which makes it feel different. It is not different, but hence why you don't see thousands of dead bodies stacked up around OCD sufferers, because it is a connection. It's a firing issue in the brain in terms of whether it is that or not, but the sort of general context is it's some kind of misfiring in the brain when triggered in relation to certain fears that create that cycle. When you get rid of those, then it doesn't fire like that. But it will still misfire at times in the sense that if I walk past an oven, years into recovery, no fears, concerns at all. If I walk past the oven, and I've got an important lunch or something I've got to go to, I will think, what's that oven? I better check that oven because it's not on, and it will feel more real. Now, that's just fired in the brain because I'm thinking, I've got to go out. I'm going out for something important. Therefore, I don't want to damage anything now. So it turns that up. Whereas now I can just go, don't need that, I can see what that's doing, and off I go, and then it's turned down. But before, there would be a cycle. So it's important to understand that. I like to draw awareness to these different issues because they take a lot of lives. Now, what does that mean? Well, you get people with POCD, for example, that never talk about it. They think it's completely real. They become utterly convinced with it, and then they end up committing suicide. So that's obviously not a good thing. So that obviously needs awareness. That can be the same for anything. I mean, having HOCD in Saudi Arabia ain't going to exactly go down well if you come out about it. So that can be very difficult too. And I see these cases because people come to me from all over the world, especially in parts of the world where this is the case. Why? Because in those parts of the world, an OCD sufferer is going to be more likely to be scared of that thing, because that's the thing that has the scary outcome. The same as in the medieval times, they were scared of hell and burning in hell forever, which people are in parts of the world which are more religious, but less so than they were in the past, where pretty much religion was, they didn't have the scientific evidence that we have today in so many areas. So obviously the general population was much more religious. So you saw a lot more religious OCD. So I think it's very important that we think about this. We stop and think about all these terms. We don't try and confuse them too much. You see it in forum posts all the time. People saying, I've had ROCD, I've had HOCD, then I had POCD, then I had real event OCD, then I had guilt OCD, then I had harm OCD. And you're thinking, Jesus, this is like a mathematical equation. And then we're setting ourselves up for viewing all these hurdles we have to get through. I've got to get through that one, and get through that one, and get through that one, and get through that one. Instead, it's taking a step back and realizing that the brain presents with a array of thoughts, and then it latches out. So it has a thought, then it latches. It has a thought, then it latches. It has a thought, and then it latches. That's all that's happened. When you're feeling better and you're going along with your life, and then a new thought comes in, and then boom, it latches to that, and it holds until it becomes less scared, and then it reduces. So we need to be aware of that. The context of all anxiety disorders is various elements that provide the framework for an anxiety cycle to continue. With OCD, you have various things. You have fear of the disorder. You have fear of never getting better again. Fear of the thing you are scared of, the thing you're scared of from the past, the thing you're scared of for the future. So it's learning to be less scared in general of these things and create a distanced approach where we're looking back at the thoughts, looking back and observing, yes, in a mindful way, but not in the sense of mindfulness alone doesn't usually, rarely cuts it for OCD when it's in its real chronic form. You need to have an understanding of self-acceptance to really get under it and really create a distance with those things and see that even if things were in reality certain things, they wouldn't be scary like you were. As Albert Ellis talks about in his guilt and shame video, even if somebody had committed 3 or 4 murders, there'd be no reason to be chronically guilty and chronically anxious. Yes, a mistake, a serious error had been made, and the human can acknowledge that and see he has made an error. He is fallible. He has made a mistake. but to be chronically guilty so that his whole life, every second he's guilty or whole life chronically anxious, serves no benefit to health to that individual. In that moment when he committed that mistake, he thought that that was the right thing or the thing to do for him. So, and it's not as simple as that. If you took all children, obviously, and gave them a good home and a good family, the chances of it would be a lot less likely. It's the sum of the environment plus the genes. Somebody who hasn't got empathy, like a lot of serial killers, they're very rare, but I'm saying people that are committing multiple criminal offences, they are in a position in their mind where to them those things don't seem as scary, or as they often know it's bad. Sometimes they don't see it like that, and it's completely different. So the perspective of the human, we have to put ourselves into their head. So it's the same as if you're arguing with someone. You've got to think, well, what are they thinking? How did they get to their position of thought? How did they get to their position of perspective? Their position comes from all the factors in their life that have brought them to this sort of experience in the present. So even somebody who's committed offences that have left them 100 years in jail, that individual does not need to feel chronically anxious. They can see that they've made a mistake, concern, a wrongdoing. They can feel sad that they have made a mistake of that magnitude, and they can want to change ways in themselves, or maybe they don't, based on genetic conditions outside of their control. Maybe they're psychopath, sociopath, whatever. So these things aren't as simplistic as that individual is bad or wrong. Even if we think of the people that we think are the most wicked in society, they could still usually do some good deeds when they try. They're not rotten through and through. All human beings are human beings, fallible. They can make mistakes. So we have to learn to accept human beings, whatever they've done, see that they're fallible, see that they can make mistakes, acknowledge they're human, see they have value just for being human. We can dislike their ways, we can dislike their errors, their judgments. We can try and have understanding into their perspective and how they see things. But we acknowledge that that is a human being. That is a human that has done something based on both their genes and their environment. Now, how much there's a free will argument there, well, it depends whether you believe in free will or not. Sam Harris has done some great, who I'm a great fan of, has done some great videos on YouTube on that, and he has a book on free will. I personally am sort of 50-50 on the matter. The science is obviously out on that one in relation to those things. It's very, very difficult to get your head around that stuff. Obviously, that can trigger existential OCD, but we can get under that too with acceptance. But it's very difficult. If we had the same genes as the people we loathe the most in society, or we were in jail or whatever, if we had the same genes and the same environment, chances are we'd have done exactly the same as them. And depending on that argument of free will, which it looks like we would have. So it's not as simplistic as we tend to sort of box things down into good, bad, black, white. We tend to do that with thinking. That's what we do as humans. It's very easy to judge, write off, separate other humans from ourselves in ways because of those judgments that are designed for survival a lot of the time. And so we've learned to think like that. But in our modern social media type world today, we're more judging than ever and writing humans off and trying to protect ourselves and our version of how we accept ourselves and so on. We will be going into great detail on this in the POCD webinar, which I just did a video on. But I wanted to talk about all those themes and the confusion around those things. So we just want to break it down to, look, we're a human being, we've got OCD. What is that? An anxiety disorder. What's that? Probably just a few cells in the brain acting in a certain way at a certain time that we do not know yet why. Okay? We have a rough idea, but not really. We don't even know what consciousness is yet, so we haven't got a great understanding of the brain, and we're going to find out more and more. Even when you look at the meds that we use for OCD, which are very helpful for taking the edge off, we don't understand why. If you read about them, they say they don't understand why it has that effect or why it did that. They have a rough idea, but they're not sure. So it's about having a bit of insight into that, looking at those things and seeing that you've got a brain, it's acting in a certain way just because brains can, like with anything that the brain does. And that's it. There's not much more to it than that. And We add all the rest of the story. Oh, I'm a this. Oh, I'm a that. Oh, did this and I did that. But it's all coming from the brain. The brain's like a kind of chemistry set that's creating all these things and all these sensations and feelings, and we need to become an observer of that. A very mindful lesson. Becoming an observer of thoughts and emotions and realizing we do not need to be a slave to them. But it's tricky when we've got if we have conditional self-acceptance and we're very tied into I'm bad, I'm this, I'm that, if this is da 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 da. So we need to unconditional self-life acceptance, the main principles taught by the founder of CBT, Albert Ellis, provide a very nice framework that fits in well with mindfulness. So you have the combination effect of the two, so you get that nice freeing separation, which I experience today. Not all the time. I get annoyed if you heard me on the phone to, say, an internet provider. I might not look the most rational, I can tell you. And that's because in that moment I've allowed myself to be angry. And if I take a step back and go, why am I letting this person who I don't even know annoy me, then I'd be calmer, and then I'd be rational, which I can do, and I can easily do, but you don't always do it. Sometimes you get carried away and you forget about it. So you're human. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be rational with time. You're going to think different things. Things are going to change. Your perspectives are going to change. Your experience with OCD is going to change. Your experience with you is going to change. Everything is changing. And we also live in a world today where, if you go online, there's millions self-motivation websites and stuff which kind of touch the same subjects that most of them do, and the sort of repackaged versions of the same thing. You don't need to work harder and work 20 hours a day or work out 20 hours a day. You actually need to learn to not fight yourself, not battle yourself, not put yourself down and try and beat yourself into submission. All tactics we have learnt throughout our life. Oh, you've done bad in this exam, you need to try harder, you should really have a strong thing, which then people will think means turning in on themselves and beating themselves up internally, which it doesn't. But we've all learnt and seen other humans go down the same mistake-ridden track and they go down that, and then we get into this cycle all the time of beating ourselves up, self-loathing, self-hate, all these things, where we need to observe and think, well, I'm human, I can make these mistakes, these things can come along, these things can happen, and this is all part of the human experience. This is the journey. This is what is going to happen. You're not reading these books on motivation and self-help to build a perfection. You're doing it to acknowledge you are imperfect and will make these mistakes, and these things will occur and happen. This is the journey. This is what it's about, and this is a large part of what I'm teaching on a daily basis. Learning to see that you do not need to have perfection. You do not need to beat yourself up. You can feel anxiety. You can feel guilt for now, and that is okay. And you are learning to see you do not need to feel guilty, and you do not need to feel anxious. But that is a learning process, a pathway paved by mistakes that form a framework to a more relaxed internal, getting a bit lost with words myself here, sort of giving up an internal resistance, which is a process, giving up an internal treading of water, an internal fight to get out of the current state. In the current state, you will feel the chronic guilt and anxiety because you can't yet experience the release of the internal fighting because you're too scared to give it up. So the brain has learnt to do it. The brain has learnt to do it over and over. The brain has learnt to do it every day. The brain has learned to do it in your sleep. The brain has learned to do it in the shower, on the street, wherever you are. It has learned that pattern, and it doesn't know another pattern because it has not yet seen how to break that framework of fear. And that is what we do, breaking that down. Guys, I will see you on the next Instagram Live where I'll be covering question and answers in detail. I will see you guys there. Take it easy.